The late afternoon light filtered through the tall glass windows of Montrose, an upscale restaurant nestled in the heart of downtown Boston. October had painted the city in amber and crimson, and outside fallen leaves danced across the sidewalks in the cool autumn breeze. Inside, tables were adorned with crisp white linen and polished silverware that gleamed under soft lighting. The low hum of conversation mingled with the gentle notes of jazz floating from hidden speakers. In the corner of the restaurant, at a table elegantly set for two, sat Michael Harrison. His fingers manicured to perfection, tapped once on the face of his Patek Philippe watch. The timepiece was worth more than most people's monthly salary, but to Michael, it wasn't about the money. It was about precision, control, discipline, the steady rhythm of seconds passing, predictable and unwavering, unlike people. 17 minutes past the hour. His jaw flexed a barely perceptible movement. Michael hated lateness. Not because of the inconvenience, his entire life was scheduled to the minute. So he always had something productive to do with unexpected gaps of time, but because it reminded him of something else. A feeling of being overlooked, forgotten. A memory surfaced unbidden. A small boy standing alone outside Franklin Music School, clutching a portfolio of sheet music. Rain falling steadily, soaking through his coat. Cars passing headlights, illuminating his small figure, then moving on. His mother had promised to be there at 4 o'clock sharp. The boy checked his watch every few minutes until darkness fell, and it was his father who finally appeared, expression grim, offering no explanation except 5 words that would forever change that 8-year-old's life. "Your mother is gone, Michael." Back in the present, Michael blinked the memory away. He placed his napkin beside his untouched water glass and pushed his chair back, the legs sliding silently against the marble floor. The maitre d' noticed his movement and approached with a concerned expression, but Michael lifted his hand slightly. Not now. He had built an empire to never feel forgotten again. His company, Harrison Innovations, was revolutionizing medical technology, saving countless lives with cutting-edge equipment that made surgeries safer, diagnoses more accurate. At 39, Michael had achieved everything he had set out to accomplish: financial security, professional respect, complete independence. He answered to no one, depended on no one. And if sometimes late at night in his penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, he felt a hollowness that no acquisition or achievement could fill, well, that was simply the cost of success. Michael stood buttoning his tailored suit jacket with a practiced motion. As CEO of a billion-dollar company preparing for its IPO, he couldn't afford to waste time on people who didn't respect it. Whoever his blind date was arranged through an exclusive matchmaking service that catered to Boston's elite clearly didn't value punctuality. That alone told him everything he needed to know. Then it happened. A small figure darted between the legs of a waiter and a passing couple. A blur of blonde curls and determined little steps. She ran straight toward him, uninvited and uninhibited, clutching a plush purple dinosaur in one hand. She bumped into his leg and looked up with wide blue eyes, cheeks flushed from the run. "My mommy's sorry she's late," the little girl said breathlessly, as if this apology had been rehearsed and meant the world to deliver correctly. Michael froze. For the first time in a very long time, he found himself at a complete loss for words. The restaurant around him seemed a blur. All the precision in his world, the ticking watch, the measured tone of jazz, the rhythm of his structured life paused. She was maybe 4. A wisp of a child wearing denim overalls over a yellow t-shirt. One sock slightly slouched, the other perfectly in place. A tiny silver barrette held a strand of hair to the side, but the rest was a tousled halo of golden curls. And those eyes, honest, expectant, impossibly blue. His lips parted, but before he could formulate a response, the girl continued. "Mommy had to help a man who fell down. She's a nurse. She saves people." Pride inflected every word as she looked up at him, clearly expecting him to understand the importance of this explanation. The other diners had noticed the scene unfolding. Some were smiling indulgently. A few were checking their phones, no doubt recognizing Michael Harrison, whose face occasionally graced the business sections of major newspapers. A waiter hovered uncertainly nearby, unsure whether to intervene. "I see," Michael finally managed, his voice softer than usual. Something inside him, something old and quietly wounded, stirred. He had been that boy once making excuses for someone who didn't show, telling himself stories about why they were late, why they forgot. A voice called out from behind, "Lily, Lily, honey." A woman hurried into view, slightly out of breath, heels clicking unevenly against the floor. Michael looked up, and time seemed to slow again, but in an entirely different way. She was striking, though not in the manufactured way of the women he typically encountered in his social circle. Her blonde hair was escaping a low bun, face flushed with a combination of embarrassment and exertion. She wore a simple navy dress that had seen better days, but suited her slim figure, and carried a tote bag that looked far too heavy for one shoulder. No expensive jewelry, not even a watch, just a thin silver bracelet that caught the light as she reached for the child. Their eyes met, and for a moment she hesitated, a flash of recognition crossing her features. Not that she knew him personally, Michael was certain they'd never met, but the kind of recognition that came from seeing someone who seemed oddly familiar, like the beginning of déjà vu. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice warm but rushed, as she wrapped her arms protectively around the little girl. "She insisted on finding you rather than waiting by the door." The child beamed. "I did it, Mommy. I told him." The woman laughed softly, a genuine sound, then looked at Michael again. "Rachel Morgan," she said, extending her hand, "and this is my daughter, Lily." He shook it instinctively. Her grip was firm, honest, no pretenses, no gloss. "Michael Harrison." A flicker of something crossed her face. Not quite the usual reaction his name provoked, which typically ranged from barely concealed excitement to calculating assessment. This was more like quiet acknowledgement. She had heard the name most people had, but she didn't mention it. Instead, she turned to her daughter. "Lily, can you say sorry for running off?" Lily nodded dutifully. "Sorry, Mr. Michael." Michael blinked. "It's okay," he said almost too quietly. The maitre d' arrived, unsure whether to intervene or serve. Michael lifted his hand slightly in a gesture that had become second nature, a silent command that said he was in control of the situation. The man retreated with a nod. "We should let you get back to your evening," Rachel said, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "Again, I'm very sorry for the interruption." "Were you meeting someone?" Michael found himself asking, surprising himself with the question. She looked momentarily flustered. "Yes, actually, a blind date. Table 14, but..." She glanced around the restaurant. "I'm so late they've probably left. Not that I can blame them." Michael's brows rose slightly. "Table 14, that's this table." Rachel stared at him, then at the table setting, then back at him. "Oh, you're..." She trailed off, realization dawning. "Alexander," Michael shook his head. "No, I'm waiting for someone named Catherine." They looked at each other for a long moment, then Rachel broke into a smile that transformed her entire face. "Wrong blind dates, both of us." "Apparently," Michael said, finding himself smiling back despite the bizarre circumstances. "Two mistakes in one night. That must be a record even for me," Rachel said, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Well, we should..." "Mommy, I'm hungry," Lily announced, tugging at her mother's dress. "You said we'd have fancy bread." Rachel's expression shifted to gentle apology directed at both her daughter and Michael. "Honey, Mr. Michael was waiting for someone else. We need to go home now." Michael surprised himself again by saying, "Why don't you join me?" The words hung in the air, as unexpected to him as they clearly were to her. In his 20-year career, Michael Harrison had never acted on impulse. Every decision, from investments to lunch orders, was calculated for maximum efficiency and benefit. Yet here he was inviting a woman he didn't know, who wasn't even his scheduled date to dinner. "Oh, we couldn't possibly," Rachel began. "Please," Michael said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "You've had a long day by the sound of it." And he glanced at Lily, who was eyeing the breadbasket with undisguised interest. "I believe there was a promise of fancy bread." Rachel hesitated, clearly torn. "You're sure? I mean, I'm sure your actual date might still..." Michael checked his watch again. 23 minutes late. "In my experience, that's not someone who values my time." He pulled out the chair for her. "Besides, I'm curious to hear what kept you." As Rachel settled into the chair, helping Lily onto a booster seat that the waiter swiftly provided, Michael observed how she moved. Every gesture was calm and purposeful, full of care. She adjusted her own chair with a quiet apology to the waiter, and exhaled deeply, just once a silent reset after what had clearly been a challenging day. So, Michael began once they were settled, and Lily was happily examining a roll from the breadbasket. What happened that made you late? Your daughter mentioned someone falling. Rachel tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. There was a man who collapsed near Park Street Station. Cardiac event, at least that's what it looked like. I stopped to help until the ambulance arrived. She said it simply without drama, as if helping strangers in medical emergencies was as routine as stopping for coffee. Michael found himself genuinely intrigued. Most people in his social circle would have considered such an incident someone else's problem, especially when running late for an engagement. Most people don't stop. Rachel shrugged lightly. Most people assume someone else will. There it was again, that quiet conviction. She didn't know what surprised him more, the fact that she had stopped for a stranger or the way she spoke about it like it was the most normal thing in the world. It took longer than I thought, she added. The ambulance was slow getting through traffic. And yet you still came, Michael asked, genuinely curious. Well, Rachel glanced at Lily with a smile. Someone insisted we still come. She was very excited about eating at a fancy restaurant. I'm glad you did, Michael said, almost before realizing he had said it. Lily giggled and waved at a passing waiter who smiled back at her. Mommy fixes peep, she informed Michael solemnly. At the hospital. She makes ouchies better. Rachel smiled at her daughter, then turned her attention back to Michael. I hope you weren't waiting too long. He hesitated. 17 minutes. His usual precision slipped out before he could soften it. Her smile faltered for a split second. That's very specific. I noticed time, he said simply. Well, 17 minutes is pretty long to wait for a stranger, she acknowledged. I appreciate your patience. Something about the sincerity in her apology, not defensive, not overdone, softened the tension he always held around lateness. In his world, every second was $1. Every delay was a crack in the system. But this woman had chosen a stranger's life over punctuality. That unsettled something deep in him. The waiter appeared to take their drink orders. Rachel requested water, hesitating over the wine list with a glance at the prices. Michael ordered a bottle of Bordeaux for the table without mentioning the cost. When Rachel excused herself to take Lily to the restroom, Michael found himself watching them go. The woman in the simple dress and the little girl skipping beside her with an unfamiliar feeling stirring in his chest. His phone vibrated, then again and again. A cascade of notifications lit up the screen. 3 missed calls from Victoria Grant, his marketing director. 2 from Howard Blackwell, chairman of the board. 5 urgent emails marked IPO prep and investor questions. Text messages asking where he was, why he wasn't responding, what they should tell the executives waiting in the conference room. For 17 years since founding Harrison Innovations from his Harvard dorm room, Michael had never ignored a business emergency. He had taken calls during funerals, cut short vacations, and once even participated in a board meeting via phone from a hospital bed after minor surgery. Now, with what could only be described as a corporate fire burning, Michael Harrison did the unthinkable. He silenced his phone and placed it face down on the table. When Rachel and Lily returned, Michael found himself more relaxed than he had been in months, possibly years. The conversation flowed easily as they ordered. Rachel chose the salmon after a brief internal debate that played across her expressive face. Michael selected the steak without looking at the menu. He had memorized it on previous business dinners. For Lily, they modified a pasta dish that wasn't technically on the children's menu, the chef making an exception after a quiet word from the maitre d'. So, Boston Memorial, Michael said, recalling her mention of the hospital. You're a nurse there. Head nurse in the pediatric emergency department. Rachel replied, a touch of pride in her voice. I've been there 8 years now. That must be challenging work, Michael said, genuinely interested. It can be hard, she admitted. But there's nothing like the feeling when a child comes in scared and hurting and leaves feeling better. Her eyes lit up as she spoke about her work, and Michael realized she didn't view it as a job or even a career. It was a calling. As their main courses arrived, Lily reached for her water glass, but her small hand knocked it over instead. Water cascaded across the table, splashing onto Michael's crisp white shirt and expensive suit pants. Several nearby diners looked over at the commotion. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Rachel said, mortified, grabbing her napkin and reaching across the table. Lily's eyes widened in alarm. I didn't mean to, she said, lower lip beginning to tremble. Michael's first instinct was annoyance. The suit was Tom Ford, the shirt custom made. But the look of genuine fear that flashed across Lily's face stopped him cold. He recognized that look. The dread of having made a mistake that couldn't be fixed. Of disappointing an adult whose reaction you couldn't predict. Instead of the sharp response that might have come naturally, Michael pulled out his pocket square, a silk handkerchief with his monogrammed initials, and began to dab at his shirt. It's just water, he said, calmly looking directly at Lily. And do you know something about water? He leaned in as if sharing a secret. Lily shook her head, still apprehensive. Water always dries, Michael said with a small smile. I have dozens of shirts just like this one at home, but there's only one tonight having dinner with you and your mom, so it doesn't matter at all. Relief washed over the child's face, replaced almost immediately by curiosity. Why do you have so many same shirts? Don't you like different colors? Michael found himself chuckling, an unfamiliar sensation. I suppose I like things to be the same. It makes decisions easier in the morning. I like purple best, Lily informed him seriously. And dinosaurs. I can see that. Michael nodded toward the purple plush dinosaur now seated on the chair beside her. Does your dinosaur have a name? Rex, Lily said proudly. He's a girl. Rachel watched this exchange with a mixture of relief and something else, assessment, perhaps. As if she were seeing Michael properly for the first time. The way he had spoken to Lily with such unexpected gentleness had clearly surprised her. As the dinner progressed, Michael found himself sharing more than he typically would on a first meeting. He told Rachel about Harrison Innovations, though he downplayed his role, describing himself as working in medical technology rather than specifying he was the founder and CEO. He wasn't entirely sure why he obscured this fact, except that he enjoyed how Rachel spoke to him without the deference or calculation that often accompanied conversations once people knew his net worth. In turn, Rachel shared glimpses of her life, how she worked night shifts 3 days a week so she could be with Lily during the day, the small apartment they shared in Dorchester. Her love of piano, though she rarely had time to play anymore. What about Lily's father? Michael asked carefully, noticing there had been no mention of him. A shadow crossed Rachel's face. Nathan left when I was 6 months pregnant. Said he wasn't ready to be a father. She smiled ruefully, as if any of us are ever really ready for something that changes our lives so completely. Michael nodded, understanding more than she realized. No one was ever ready for abandonment either. Lily starts kindergarten next month. Rachel continued, clearly preferring to focus on the present. She's excited about the library they have. She loves books. I love stories, Lily chimed in, her face now smeared with chocolate from the dessert they were sharing, especially ones with dragons and princesses who save themselves. No princes coming to the rescue then? Michael asked with amusement. Lily shook her head emphatically. Princes are okay, but princesses have prettier dresses and they can still fight dragons. Michael laughed, a genuine laugh that felt foreign in his throat. Can't argue with that logic. As the evening wound down, Michael insisted on paying the bill, waving away Rachel's protests. Outside the restaurant, the October air had turned crisp. Lily yawned widely, leaning against her mother's leg. We should get her home, Rachel said softly. Thank you for dinner. It was unexpected but lovely. Let me call you a car, Michael offered, already reaching for his phone. Rachel shook her head. The tea is fine. We're used to it. Please, Michael said, meeting her eyes. It's late and she's tired. After a moment's hesitation, Rachel nodded her acceptance. While they waited for the kid, Michael's phone began buzzing again, incessant, demanding. Victoria's name flashed on the screen, along with a text, emergency board call in progress. Where are you, critical IPO issue? For a moment, Michael felt the familiar pull of obligation, the automatic response to business urgency that had defined his adult life. Then he looked at Rachel, who was gently stroking Lily's hair, as the child leaned against her eyes, heavy with approaching sleep. Something shifted in his perspective, a subtle but profound realignment, like tectonic plates moving imperceptibly beneath the surface. The black town car arrived, and Michael held the door as Rachel helped Lily inside. Thank you again, Rachel said, pausing before getting in, for understanding about being late and for the lovely dinner. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, the standard issue with the Harrison Innovations logo and his title clearly displayed. But then he did something unprecedented. He borrowed a pen from the driver and wrote his personal cell number on the back, a number that fewer than 10 people in the world possessed. "If you ever need anything," he said, simply handing it to her. "Anything at all." Rachel looked at the card, her eyes widening slightly as she registered his full title. She glanced up at him with new understanding, but surprisingly no change in how she addressed him. "You're more than working in medical technologies, it seems." Michael shrugged, a casual gesture he rarely employed. "It's just a title." "Well, thank you, Mr. CEO," she said with a small smile, pocketing the card. "Maybe we'll see you around sometime." "I'd like that," Michael replied, surprising himself with his sincerity. As the car pulled away, Lily pressed her face to the window and waved enthusiastically. Michael raised his hand in response, watching until the taillights disappeared around a corner. Only then did he look down at his phone, now overflowing with increasingly urgent messages. For the first time in his professional life, Michael Harrison had completely ignored a corporate emergency for over 2 hours. For the first time, something else had felt more important. When he arrived at the Harrison Innovations headquarters, a sleek glass tower overlooking the Charles River, it was past 10 o'clock. The main floor was deserted except for security, but he knew the executive suite would still be buzzing with activity. Corporate crises didn't observe business hours. The elevator whisked him to the top floor, where he found Victoria Grant pacing in his office. She was striking in the conventional sense, tall, impeccably groomed, with the kind of polished beauty that came from expensive maintenance. Her Armani suit and Louboutin heels projected the image of success she had carefully cultivated as marketing director. "Where have you been?" she demanded as soon as he walked in, her voice a mixture of relief and irritation. "We've been trying to reach you for hours. The Westlake Group is threatening to pull their investment if we don't address their concerns about the regulatory approval timeline." Michael should have been equally alarmed. The Westlake Group represented nearly $50 million in potential IPO investment, yet somehow he couldn't muster the appropriate level of panic. "It's handled," Victoria continued when he didn't immediately respond. "I assured them that the FDA approval for the cardiac sensor is on track for Q1, and Howard backed me up with the clinical trial data." She studied his face. "Are you listening? This was a 5-alarm fire, Michael. Where were you?" Michael moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the nighttime Boston skyline. "I had dinner," he said simply. "Dinner," Victoria repeated flatly. "With Catherine, the woman Elise set you up with? Because when we couldn't reach you, I called her, and she said you never showed." "No," Michael said. "Not with Catherine." Victoria waited for him to elaborate, and when he didn't, her expression shifted from professional concern to personal interest. There had been something between them briefly years ago, a corporate relationship that crossed into personal territory during a business trip to Tokyo. It had ended as clinically as it began, with both of them agreeing it was a distraction from their professional goals. "Well," Victoria said, her tone softening slightly as she moved to stand beside him at the window. "Whoever she is, she must be something special to make Michael Harrison go off the grid during an investor crisis." Michael didn't respond, still looking out at the city lights. His mind was elsewhere, in a modest apartment in Dorchester, where a woman with honest eyes was perhaps tucking in a little girl who loved purple dinosaurs and self-rescuing princesses. "The board wants to accelerate the IPO timeline," Victoria continued, shifting back to business when it became clear Michael wouldn't share details. "Howard thinks we can be ready by February instead of May. With the market conditions and our Q3 results, the timing would be perfect." Michael nodded absently. "We'll discuss it tomorrow." Victoria looked at him oddly. In all the years they had worked together, she had never seen him defer a business discussion. Michael Harrison lived and breathed Harrison Innovations. There was no separation between the man and the company. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice. Michael turned from the window, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Perfectly fine. Better than fine, actually." His phone buzzed with a text notification. He glanced down to see a number he didn't recognize, and the message made that unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest again. "Lily wanted me to thank you for not being mad about the water, and to tell you that if you want to see a real dinosaur, she has a whole collection she'd be happy to show you sometime. Apparently you've been deemed worthy of seeing the special ones she keeps in the purple box. That's high praise from a 4-year-old connoisseur of prehistoric creatures." Thank you again for a lovely evening. Rachel. Victoria watched Michael's expression change as he read the text. Something shifted in her own eyes, a recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of concern. The Westlake issue is resolved for now, she said, gathering her things. But Howard wants to meet first thing tomorrow. IPO discussions, 9 a.m. Michael slipped his phone back into his pocket, that small smile still playing at his lips. I'll be there. After Victoria left, Michael remained at the window for a long time. Below, the city continued its nighttime rhythm, cars moving along illuminated streets, late workers heading home, couples walking hand in hand along the river path. For the first time in 20 years, Michael Harrison felt the subtle but unmistakable sensation of his carefully constructed world beginning to tilt on its axis. And even more surprisingly, he wasn't immediately moving to correct its balance. His phone chimed with another incoming message. He expected it to be Rachel again, but instead it was Howard Blackwell. Board members concerned about recent press need to discuss image management before IPO. See attached. Michael opened the attachment. It was a photo from a blog called Tech Insider, showing him with Rachel and Lily outside the restaurant, the three of them caught in a moment of laughter as they waited for the car. The headline read, Playboy CEO Michael Harrison playing family with unknown single mom PR strategy or something more. The subtle tilt of his world suddenly accelerated, and Michael Harrison felt the first tremors of what would become a seismic shift in the foundations of his life. 2 weeks passed like a dream sequence in a film where time compresses and expands in equal measure. For Michael Harrison, a man whose life had been measured in quarterly reports and strategic milestones, these 14 days marked the strangest departure from routine he'd experienced since founding Harrison Innovations. The Boston autumn deepened around them. Leaves turned from vibrant orange to deeper amber, then fell in graceful spirals to carpet the sidewalks. The air grew sharper, carrying the promise of winter, yet somehow everything felt warmer in Michael's world. Saturday afternoon found him at the Boston Children's Museum with Rachel and Lily. He stood in his casual clothes, dark jeans, and a cashmere sweater that still probably cost more than Rachel's entire outfit, watching Lily climb through the massive 3-story playground structure. Her laughter echoed through the space, pure and uninhibited. She's never been so excited about anything, Rachel said, standing beside him, her shoulder occasionally brushing against his arm. She told everyone at her preschool that she was going to the museum with her mom and her new friend who wears fancy watches. Michael glanced down at his wrist, where his Patek Philippe gleamed. Is that how she sees me? The man with a fancy watch. Rachel smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners, among other things. She also says you're the only grown-up besides me who answers all her questions properly. She asks good questions, Michael replied, watching as Lily waved frantically at them from inside a bubble window on the second level of the climbing structure. And she did. Questions like, why does water stay in clouds if it's so heavy? And how do machines know what people are saying? And most memorably, if you're so rich, why don't you smile more? That last one had left Michael momentarily speechless during their second meeting, a walk through Boston Common, where Lily had collected precisely 64 leaves of different colors. They moved through the museum's exhibits, Michael finding himself genuinely engaged by the simple interactive displays designed for children. He'd never visited such a place, not even in his own childhood. His father had considered such outings frivolous, focusing instead on educational experiences with clear future benefits, piano lessons, language tutorials, museum visits, centered on classical art and history. Watching Lily discover the properties of water currents in the bubble tank, her face alight with wonder, Michael wondered what he'd missed. You're different than I expected, Rachel said quietly as they sat on a bench, watching Lily construct an elaborate block tower with intense concentration. Different how, when I first saw your business card, she hesitated. I looked you up that night. There were all these articles about the machine of medical tech, that's what Forbes called you. Cold, calculating, ruthlessly efficient. Michael nodded slightly. That's an accurate assessment of my professional reputation. But it's not who you are with her, Rachel said, nodding toward Lily. Or with me. Michael considered this. In the past 2 weeks, he had read bedtime stories featuring dragons help build a fort in Rachel's small living room and spent 30 minutes searching for a missing purple sock that had eventually been discovered in Rex the dinosaur's mouth. None of these activities appeared on the resume of the machine of medical tech. Maybe I'm discovering parts of myself I didn't know existed, he said, finally surprising himself with the candor. Rachel's eyes met his, warm and appraising. That's a good thing, you know. Most people stop discovering new sides of themselves far too early. Later that afternoon, they stopped at a local diner that Rachel frequented, a far cry from Michael's usual dining establishments. The vinyl booth squeaked as they slid in, and the laminated menus featured photographs of food alongside the descriptions. Michael ordered a chocolate milkshake at Lily's insistence that it was the best thing they make, even better than pancakes. His phone remained in his pocket, silenced, but occasionally vibrating with what he knew would be urgent messages. 2 board meetings had been rescheduled this week because of his sudden, personal commitments, a phrase that had never before appeared on Michael Harrison's calendar. As they left the diner, a light rain began to fall. Michael immediately removed his coat and held it over Rachel and Lily as they made their way back to his car, another departure from routine. He typically had a driver, but had taken to driving himself when meeting Rachel and Lily, preferring the privacy and freedom it afforded. "You'll get wet," Rachel protested, but Michael shook his head. "My dry cleaning bill is a rounding error in my monthly expenses," he said with a small smile. "Your hair, on the other hand, is a work of art that shouldn't be disturbed." Rachel laughed, a sound that had become increasingly important to Michael's sense of well-being. "Messy mom bun is high art. Now there's a concept." As they drove toward Dorchester, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, clutching Rex the dinosaur. In the quiet of the car, with rain pattering against the windows and the soft sound of Lily's breathing, Michael felt a peace he couldn't remember experiencing before. "Would you like to come up for coffee?" Rachel asked when they arrived at her apartment building. "Real coffee, not the instant stuff we had last time." I splurged on the good beans. The invitation hung between them, weighted with possibilities. In the 2 weeks they'd spent together, there had been moments, her hand lingering on his arm as she laughed at something he said, his fingers brushing against hers as they both reached for Lily's coat, a charged silence as they stood close together in her small kitchen. But neither had taken the step to define what was happening between them. "I'd like that," Michael replied simply. The apartment looked different this time, tidier, with a vase of fresh flowers on the coffee table and the piano in the corner, freshly dusted. Small adjustments that spoke volumes about Rachel's anticipation of his visit. Michael carried the still sleeping Lily to her bedroom, carefully laying her on the bed covered with purple sheets featuring constellations. Rachel removed the child's shoes and tucked a blanket around her, brushing a gentle kiss against her forehead. In the kitchen, Rachel moved with practiced efficiency in the small space, grinding coffee beans and heating water. "It's not much," she said, gesturing around the modest apartment, "but it's home." Michael looked around at the crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator, the worn but clean furniture, the secondhand piano in the corner with sheet music open to Debussy's Clair de Lune. Every surface held evidence of a life being actively lived, memories being intentionally made. "It's more of a home than my place," he said honestly. His penthouse apartment, while architecturally stunning and filled with expensive art and furniture, contained no personal photographs, no mementos, nothing that wasn't aesthetically perfect and emotionally sterile. As Rachel prepared the coffee, Michael noticed a stack of medical journals on the counter alongside some official-looking hospital correspondence. "You're studying?" he asked, gesturing to the materials. Rachel nodded. "I'm applying for the director of nursing position that's opening next year. It would mean regular hours, better pay, actual benefits." She handed him a mug of coffee. "It's a long shot, but I have to try. For Lily." "I'm sure you're more than qualified," Michael said, accepting the coffee. Rachel leaned against the counter. "There's qualified on paper, and then there's office politics. Dr. Peterson, he's the medical director, has been supportive, but some of the board members prefer candidates with more administrative experience." Michael fought the immediate impulse to offer assistance. His company regularly donated to Boston Memorial. One phone call could potentially secure her the position. But something told him Rachel wouldn't welcome that kind of intervention. "You'll impress them," he said instead. "Anyone who spent 5 minutes with you can see your capabilities." Her smile was genuine but tinged with the pragmatism of someone who'd learned not to expect too much. "We'll see. The first round of interviews isn't until January." They moved to the living room, sitting closer together on the worn sofa than was strictly necessary. Through the thin walls, they could hear elderly Mrs. Winters playing classical music next door. Chopin, Michael identified automatically. Nocturne in E-flat major. Rachel looked surprised. You know classical music? 12 years of piano lessons, Michael explained. My mother was a pianist before she... He stopped abruptly, unaccustomed to discussing his past. Rachel waited, not pushing, but clearly interested. Her presence had a quality that invited confidence, a stillness that created space for words to form and find their way out. Before she left, Michael finished finally. I was 8. She just disappeared one day. My father said she wasn't coming back and we never spoke of her again. Rachel's hand found his warm and steady. I'm so sorry, Michael. It was a long time ago. The practiced response fell flat even to his own ears. Some wounds don't care how much time has passed, Rachel said softly. They stay fresh because we keep bumping into them in unexpected places. Michael looked at their joined hands, marveling at how natural it felt. Like when a little girl says her mother is late and suddenly you're 8 years old again, standing in the rain. Rachel's eyes held a compassion that wasn't pity, a crucial distinction that allowed Michael to continue rather than retreat. My father raised me after that, if you can call it raising. William Harrison believed in discipline, achievement, and self-sufficiency above all else. Emotions were inefficient at best, dangerous at worst. That explains a lot, Rachel said gently. Does it? Michael asked. The way you check your watch constantly. The perfect suits, the need to control every variable. Her thumb traced small circles on the back of his hand. You built a life where nothing could be unpredictable enough to hurt you again. The insights drawing with uncomfortable precision. No therapist had ever managed to distill his life choices so accurately, though not for lack of trying. His ex-fiancée from 10 years ago had insisted he see someone to discuss his emotional unavailability, but he'd dismissed the entire field as subjective pseudoscience. Now sitting in Rachel's modest apartment, with rain falling outside and Chopin floating through the walls, Michael Harrison found himself wondering if his meticulously constructed life had been built not to achieve success, but to avoid pain. What about you? He asked, deflecting gently. Lily's father, Nathan, was it? Rachel nodded. Nathan Brooks, graphic designer, aspiring musician, and expert at avoiding responsibility. She sighed. We met at a benefit concert. I was volunteering in the medical tent. He was working the sound booth. Whirlwind romance moved in together after 3 months pregnant, by 6 months, and by the 7th month he was gone. He left when you were pregnant. Michael couldn't keep the incredulity from his voice. Said he never signed up for fatherhood. Rachel made air quotes with her free hand, as if pregnancy was something I decided to spring on him as a surprise. She shook her head. The irony is, I'd always wanted children. He knew that. I think he just never believed it would actually happen, or what it would mean when it did. Michael felt an unfamiliar surge of anger toward a man he'd never met. Does he ever see Lily? He sends birthday cards occasionally. Called once when she was 2, but he was clearly high and I hung up. Rachel's voice remained steady, but Michael could sense the steel beneath. I told him he could be all in or all out, but I wouldn't let Lily be an afterthought in someone's life. Children know when they're not a priority. The statement hung between them, resonating with Michael's own childhood experiences. He'd always known he wasn't his father's priority. The company was, the legacy was. Michael himself was just the vessel for continuing both. She's lucky to have you, Michael said quietly. Rachel smiled, the genuine warmth returning to her expression. I'm the lucky one. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, even on the days when she decides to finger paint the bathroom mirror. As the evening deepened, their conversation continued, flowing naturally between serious topics and lighter moments. Michael found himself sharing stories he'd never told anyone about the prestigious boarding school where he'd excelled academically, but made no real friends, about his first failed startup before Harrison Innovations, about the crushing loneliness that sometimes overtook him despite being surrounded by employees and associates. In turn, Rachel told him about growing up in a small town in western Massachusetts, learning piano from her grandmother, working 3 jobs to put herself through nursing school, and the terror and exhilaration of becoming a mother on her own. Neither noticed the hours passing until a small voice interrupted them. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." They turned to see Lily standing in the hallway, hair tousled from sleep, Rex the dinosaur dangling from one hand. "Of course, baby," Rachel said, standing up. "Water or milk?" "Water, please," Lily said, then noticed Michael with evident delight. "You're still here. Can you read me another story?" Rachel gave Michael an apologetic look. "Honey, it's late, and I'm sure Michael needs to—" "I'd be happy to read you a story," Michael interrupted, surprising himself again with how easily he was adapting to Lily's requests. Lily beamed, completely awake now despite the late hour. "I'll get the book about the penguin family. It's my new favorite." As she scampered back to her room, Rachel looked at Michael with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something that made his heart beat a little faster. "You don't have to," she said. "I know you probably have early meetings tomorrow." Michael checked his watch automatically, almost midnight, but for once the late hour didn't trigger his usual anxiety about efficiency and adequate rest. "Some things are more important than meetings," he said simply. 20 minutes later, Michael sat on the edge of Lily's small bed, reading about a family of penguins navigating the challenges of Antarctic life. Lily's eyes grew heavy again as he read, and by the final page she was drifting back to sleep. "Night, Mr. Michael," she murmured, already half dreaming. "You read the best stories 'cause you do all the voices right." Something shifted in Michael's chest, a tightening that wasn't unpleasant but was entirely unfamiliar. He carefully tucked the blanket around her small shoulders. "Good night, Lily," he whispered, resisting a strange impulse to kiss her forehead as he'd seen Rachel do. When he returned to the living room, Rachel was standing by the window watching the rain. The soft lamplight caught the gold in her hair, creating a gentle halo effect that made her look like a figure from a Renaissance painting. "She's asleep," Michael said, his voice low. Rachel turned and the expression on her face made his breath catch. In that moment, with the rain pattering against the windows and the distant strains of Chopin still floating through the walls, something inevitable passed between them. Neither was sure who moved first. Perhaps they moved simultaneously, drawn together by forces more powerful than conscious decision. Her hands found his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist, and when their lips met, it felt like a resolution to a question neither had fully articulated. The kiss deepened, years of solitude and careful distance dissolving in the simple human connection of two people finding something unexpected and precious in each other. When they finally pulled apart, Rachel's cheeks were flushed, and Michael found himself uncharacteristically speechless. "That was," Rachel began, "long overdue." Michael finished, his voice rough with emotion. She laughed softly, resting her forehead against his chest. "I was going to say surprising, but yes, that too." He held her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. For a man who had spent his adult life avoiding emotional entanglements, the intensity of his feelings should have triggered alarm. Instead, he felt a curious sense of rightness, as if some part of him had been waiting for this moment without his conscious awareness. "I should go," he said reluctantly, aware of the lateness and the propriety of the situation with Lily sleeping nearby. Rachel nodded, though her hands remained on his arms, as if equally reluctant to break the connection. "Will I see you tomorrow?" "Try to stop me," Michael replied with a smile that felt foreign on his face, unguarded, genuine, hopeful. As he drove home through the rainy Boston streets, Michael's phone buzzed with a message. Expecting Rachel, he was surprised to see Howard Blackwell's name on the screen. "Board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Urgent discussion regarding recent press coverage and IPO implications. Attendance mandatory." Michael frowned suddenly, remembering the photo that had appeared on Tech Insider. In the whirlwind of the past 2 weeks, he'd dismissed it as minor gossip, but clearly the board saw it differently. When he reached his penthouse, the stark modernity of the space struck him anew. The clean lines and minimalist decor that had once represented sophisticated simplicity now felt sterile and impersonal. There were no crayon drawings on his refrigerator, no well-worn furniture bearing the imprint of years of use, no evidence that the space was lived in rather than merely occupied. For the first time, his carefully curated existence seemed less like an achievement and more like an absence. The next morning found Michael in the Harrison Innovations boardroom, surrounded by the somber faces of his executive team. Howard Blackwell, a distinguished man in his 60s who had been Michael's mentor and earliest investor, sat at the head of the table opposite Michael. Victoria Grant sat to Howard's right, her expression carefully neutral. "Thank you all for coming," Howard began, his deep voice filling the room. "As you know, we're 3 months away from our planned IPO date. The underwriters are comfortable with our financials and growth projections, but they've raised concerns about stability and public perception." He nodded to Victoria, who tapped on her tablet. The wall screen illuminated with the Tech Insider article featuring Michael, Rachel, and Lily outside the restaurant. It wasn't the only one. There were several other photos now, including one of them at the Children's Museum and another of Michael pushing Lily on a swing at a public park. "These have been circulating for the past week." Victoria explained, her tone professional, but with an undercurrent that Michael couldn't quite identify. "The narrative is evolving from initial speculation to a more focused interest in who this woman and child are and what their relationship is to you, Michael." Howard cleared his throat. "Normally, a CEO's personal life wouldn't be our concern. But with the IPO approaching and our specific market position in medical technology, the perception of stability and reliability is crucial. Investors need to see Harrison Innovations as a sound, predictable investment." Michael leaned forward slightly. "And my having dinner with a woman and her daughter somehow contradicts that perception." Marcus Johnson, the most recently appointed board member, spoke up. "It's not the dinner, Michael. It's the pattern of behavior over the past 2 weeks. You've rescheduled critical meetings, been unreachable during business hours, and now there's speculation about your personal situation." "My personal situation," Michael repeated flatly. Victoria smoothly interjected. "What Marcus means is that the market responds best to clear narratives. Either you're the focus-driven CEO whose singular passion is revolutionizing medical technology, or you're something else. The ambiguity creates uncertainty." Michael felt a flicker of anger, carefully controlled. "And what would you suggest, that I cancel my personal life for the sake of market perception?" Howard raised a placating hand. "No one is suggesting that. In fact, we think there might be a way to align your personal interests with the company's public image." Victoria nodded, changing the display to show a mock-up of a press release. The heading read, "Harrison Innovations announces new initiative supporting single-parent healthcare workers. We've been looking for a signature philanthropic program to launch alongside the IPO," Victoria explained. "This would position your personal involvement as part of a broader corporate commitment to supporting healthcare workers like Ms. Morgan, particularly single parents who face unique challenges." Michael stared at the screen, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. "You want to turn my relationship with Rachel and Lily into a PR strategy?" Victoria's expression remained professional. "We want to align narratives in a way that benefits everyone. Ms. Morgan gets recognition and support for her work. You get to maintain your personal connection without investor concern. And Harrison Innovations strengthens its brand as a compassionate, forward-thinking company." "It's a win-win," Marcus added. "Your personal life becomes an asset rather than a liability." Michael looked around the table, seeing the executives and board members nodding in agreement, as if this proposal was not only reasonable but generous. Only Howard seemed to register his discomfort, watching Michael with a slight furrow in his brow. "And has anyone considered asking Rachel how she feels about becoming a corporate mascot?" Michael asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Victoria frowned slightly. "We wouldn't position her that way, of course. The program would support many healthcare workers. She would simply be the inspiration behind it." "The inspiration," Michael repeated. "And what happens when my relationship with her evolves or changes or ends? Does the program evolve too? Do we find another single mother to inspire us?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Howard finally broke it. "I think what Michael is expressing quite rightly is concern about authenticity. Perhaps we should table this discussion until we've had more time to develop the concept thoughtfully." Michael stood abruptly. "Table it indefinitely. My personal life is not a marketing opportunity. Now, if there's actual business to discuss, I'm happy to stay. Otherwise, I have a company to run." The meeting shifted to financial projections and regulatory updates, but Michael found it difficult to focus. The image of Rachel's face, if she ever discovered this proposal, kept intruding on his thoughts. She would be horrified, and rightly so. The idea of her integrity, her struggle, her dedication to Lily being packaged into a corporate initiative made his skin crawl. After the meeting, Howard caught up with Michael in the hallway. "You seem troubled," the older man observed. Michael exhaled slowly. Wouldn't you be, they want to commodify my personal life? Howard studied him thoughtfully. I've known you for 20 years, Michael. I was there when you were a skinny Harvard sophomore with a prototype and a business plan. In all that time, I've never seen you react so strongly to anything that wasn't directly related to this company's success. Maybe I'm changing, Michael said. Maybe you are, Howard agreed. But change, especially in a public figure like yourself, creates ripples. The board isn't wrong to be concerned about perception. The board is wrong to think they have any say in who I spend my time with. Howard placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. As your friend, I'm happy you found someone who clearly matters to you. As your chairman, I need to ensure that Harrison Innovations successfully completes this IPO. We have employees depending on us, patients who need the technology we're developing. Find a balance, Michael. That's all I'm asking. Michael nodded, not entirely mollified, but understanding Howard's position. I'll find a balance, but not at Rachel's expense. That's my line. That evening, Michael took Rachel to the symphony, something she mentioned always wanting to experience, but never finding the time or resources to attend. Lily stayed with Mrs. Winters, who was delighted to have girls' night with her young neighbor. Rachel wore a simple black dress that Michael suspected was either borrowed or purchased specially for the occasion. She looked beautiful, but visibly uncomfortable in the ornate surroundings of Symphony Hall, where Boston's elite gathered in their finery. Everyone's staring, she whispered, as they were shown to their seats in the center orchestra section. They're admiring you, Michael replied, though he knew it wasn't entirely true. People were indeed looking, but many were recognizing him and wondering about the unfamiliar woman on his arm. Boston's social circles were tight-knit, and Michael Harrison appearing with anyone was noteworthy. His appearing with someone, clearly not from their world, was downright scandalous. Rachel seemed to relax once the music began, her face softening with genuine appreciation as the orchestra performed Tchaikovsky. Michael found himself watching her more than the stage, captivated by the play of emotions across her expressive features. During intermission, Rachel excused herself to the restroom. When she returned several minutes later, her expression had changed. There was a tightness around her eyes, a subtle withdrawal in her posture. "Everything okay?" Michael asked quietly as they retook their seats. Rachel nodded, but it wasn't convincing. "Fine," she said tersely. The second half of the performance passed in a strange tension that hadn't existed before. Rachel's eyes remained on the stage, but her earlier rapture had vanished, replaced by a distracted quality that suggested her thoughts were elsewhere. It wasn't until they were in the car, driving back toward Dorchester, that she finally spoke. "Who exactly do they think I am?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. Michael glanced at her, confused. Who think you are?" "The women in the bathroom," Rachel clarified. "The ones who are very concerned about that nurse Michael Harrison is supposedly dating as some kind of charity case or PR stunt." Michael felt a cold weight settle in his stomach, the exact feeling he'd experienced during the board meeting. "Rachel, I'm sorry. Some people in my social circle can be—" "Is that what this is?" she interrupted, turning to face him fully. "A charity case, the billionaire CEO slumming it with the single mom from Dorchester?" "Of course not," Michael replied, shocked by the suggestion. "How could you even think that—" "Because you didn't tell me who you really were," Rachel said, her voice rising slightly. "When we met, you let me believe you just worked at Harrison Innovations. You never mentioned being the founder and CEO. Michael tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Would it have made a difference? Would you have treated me differently if you'd known—" "That's not the point," Rachel insisted. "The point is, you deliberately misled me." "I didn't want my title to be the thing you saw when you looked at me," Michael explained, frustration edging into his voice. "For once, I wanted someone to see me, not my company or my bank account." Rachel fell silent processing this. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. In the bathroom, they were saying there's some kind of charity initiative being planned. Something about supporting single-parent healthcare workers. The cold weight in Michael's stomach transformed into ice. "What?" "They said it was your idea, that I was the, inspiration." She spoke the last word with evident distaste. Michael pulled the car over to the side of the road, putting it in park before turning to face Rachel fully. "Listen to me," he said, his voice intense. "I had nothing to do with that. The board floated the idea this morning, and I shut it down immediately. I would never use you or Lily as a PR strategy." Rachel studied his face, searching for truth. Then why are people talking about it like it's happening? I don't know, Michael admitted, but I promise you I will find out. They sat in silence for a moment, the tension gradually easing as Rachel apparently decided to believe him. This is more complicated than I thought it would be, she finally said. Dating you. Michael reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. I know, I'm sorry. My life comes with complications. My life isn't exactly simple either, Rachel pointed out. Single mom, crazy, work schedule, apartment the size of your closet probably. Despite the tension, Michael found himself smiling. Your apartment has something mine doesn't. Crayon on the walls. Life, Michael said simply. Real life. Rachel's expression softened and she squeezed his hand. For what it's worth, I do see you. Not the CEO or the billionaire. Just Michael, the man who does dragon voices when he reads to my daughter, and who looks at his watch less often every day. The remainder of the drive passed in easier conversation, the incident at the symphony not forgotten, but temporarily set aside. When they arrived at Rachel's apartment, Michael walked her to her door. I'd invite you in, but Mrs. Winters and Lily are having a sleepover in our living room complete with fort construction, Rachel said with a small smile. Another time, Michael replied, then hesitated. Rachel, about what happened at the symphony. I want you to know that I'm going to address it. My private life it's not a corporate asset. Rachel nodded, her expression turning serious again. Just be careful, Michael. I get the feeling some people in your world don't like boundaries between personal and professional. Let me worry about that, he said, then leaned in to kiss her gently. Good night, Rachel. Good night, Michael. As he drove back to his penthouse, Michael's mind was racing. Someone on the board or executive team had clearly moved forward with the charity initiative, despite his explicit rejection of the idea. The question was who and why they would directly contradict his instructions. The answer came the next morning in the form of a press release draft on his desk, courtesy of Victoria Grant, with a post-it note reading, "For your approval before we announce next week. The board is enthusiastic about this direction." Michael read the document with growing anger. It outlined exactly what he had refused of foundations supporting single-parent healthcare workers, with specific mention of how Michael's personal connection to the healthcare community had inspired the initiative. He was still staring at the paper when Victoria entered his office, immaculately dressed as always, her expression professionally pleasant. Did you get a chance to review the draft? She asked, as if they hadn't had an entire confrontation about this very topic. Michael looked up slowly. I thought I made myself clear yesterday. Victoria's smile didn't waver. You were upset, understandably, but Howard and I discussed it further, and we all agree this is the optimal solution. It protects your personal interests while advancing the company's. My personal interests, Michael repeated, his voice dangerously quiet, which you presume to know better than I do. Victoria sighed slightly, taking a seat across from him. Michael, be reasonable. The IPO is our priority right now. Everything else is secondary. Not to me, Michael replied. Victoria's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing a flash of genuine emotion. This isn't like you. 3 weeks ago, you would have seen the strategic value immediately. 3 weeks ago, I hadn't met Rachel and Lily. Exactly my point, Victoria said, leaning forward. You're not thinking clearly. This infatuation is affecting your judgment. Michael stood abruptly. This meeting is over. And Victoria, if I see any version of this press release made public, I'll consider it grounds for immediate termination. Victoria rose slowly, her expression hardening. The board won't support that decision. Test me and find out, Michael replied evenly. After she left, Michael canceled his remaining meetings and drove to Boston Common, needing space to think. The park was quieter on a weekday, with only a few tourists and locals enjoying the autumn scenery. He found himself on a bench near the duck pond, watching the birds glide across the water's surface. His phone buzzed continuously in his pocket. Emails, texts, calls from people who believed their business concerns couldn't possibly wait. For the first time in his adult life, Michael Harrison wasn't sure what to do next. The path that had always seemed so clear, build the company, complete the IPO, expand globally, suddenly felt hollow when weighed against the joy he'd found in Rachel's small apartment and Lily's innocent questions. His phone rang again, and this time he checked the screen. Rachel's name appeared accompanied by a photo he'd taken of her and Lily at the Children's Museum, both laughing at something beyond the frame. Rachel, he answered, feeling some of the tension leave his body just saying her name. Hi, she said, her voice warm but slightly hesitant. I'm not interrupting something important, am I? Nothing more important than you, Michael replied truthfully. There was a pause, then Rachel continued. I was wondering if you'd like to come to dinner on Sunday. Nothing fancy, just a regular family dinner at my place. Mrs. Winters will be there and possibly my friend Luis from work. It's kind of a tradition we have. Family dinner. The phrase hit Michael with unexpected force. He couldn't remember the last time he'd experienced such a thing. Certainly not in his own childhood where meals with his father had been formal, silent affairs when they happened at all. I'd like that very much, he said. Good, Rachel replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Oh, and Michael wears something comfortable. No suits allowed. After they hung up, Michael remained on the bench, watching the ducks and considering how thoroughly his life had changed in just 3 short weeks. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who had built his fortune on medical devices designed to repair damaged hearts was only now discovering the true meaning of heartache and healing. His phone rang again, and this time it was Howard Blackwell. Michael, the older man began without preamble, we need to talk about Victoria's proposal. Michael closed his eyes briefly. I've already made my position clear, Howard. The board is concerned about your judgment. Howard continued, his tone carefully neutral. Your recent behavior canceling meetings, being unreachable, publicly dating someone outside our usual circles, it's raising questions. Questions about what exactly? About whether your personal interests are aligned with the company's best interest. Michael stood, suddenly needing to move. I founded this company, Howard. I've dedicated 17 years of my life to it. No one's interests are more aligned with its success than mine. That used to be true, Howard replied. Now I'm not so sure. The Michael Harrison I know wouldn't risk $1 billion IPO for a relationship that's barely 3 weeks old. The words struck with precision, but not in the way Howard likely intended. Rather than making Michael reconsider his position, they clarified something he'd been struggling to articulate even to himself. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think, Michael said quietly. Maybe I'm not willing to be just a CEO anymore. Michael, I have to go, Howard. We'll talk tomorrow. Michael ended the call and started walking, no particular destination in mind. The autumn air was crisp against his face, leaves crunching beneath his feet. For the first time in his adult life, Michael Harrison was facing a choice between the identity he had carefully constructed and the person he might become if he allowed himself to change. As he walked, his phone chimed with a text message. It was from Rachel, a simple photo of Lily at preschool, proudly holding up a drawing of what appeared to be 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small, standing in front of a house with an enormous sun overhead. The caption read, "Guess who the tall one is? Hint, she says he needs more purple in his life." Michael stopped in the middle of the path, staring at the innocent drawing that somehow represented everything he stood to gain and everything he risked losing. In that moment, standing among falling leaves with Boston's skyline in the distance, Michael Harrison made a decision that would alter the course of his meticulously planned life. He would find a way to balance both worlds, the company he had built and the family he was beginning to want. Not on the board's terms, not as a marketing strategy, but on his own terms, as a man discovering parts of himself long buried beneath ambition and control. What he didn't yet know was how fiercely those worlds would fight to remain separate, or what he would ultimately have to sacrifice to bring them together. Sunday evening arrived with a gentle snowfall, the first of the season. Delicate white flakes drifted down from a pewter sky, transforming Boston into a scene from a snow globe. Michael Harrison stood at Rachel's door, holding not flowers or wine, but a children's book about dinosaurs he'd found at a small bookstore near his office. In his other hand, a bag containing ingredients for breakfast. The following morning, his offer to make pancakes for Lily, something he'd never done but had researched extensively the night before. He paused before knocking, struck by an unfamiliar nervousness. This wasn't a business meeting or high-stakes negotiation. It was dinner with people who had become inexplicably important to him in the span of mere weeks. People who saw him not as Michael Harrison, CEO of Harrison Innovations, but simply as Michael, a man still discovering who he might be when not defined by his accomplishments. The door opened before he could knock, revealing Lily in purple pajamas decorated with stars, her blonde curls wild around her face. "You came," she exclaimed as if his arrival was the most exciting event imaginable. "I told Rex you would, but he wasn't sure because it's snowing and rich people don't like snow." Michael laughed, kneeling to her level. "Rich people like snow just fine, and I wouldn't miss dinner with you and your mom for anything." Lily took his hand with easy familiarity and pulled him inside. The small apartment was transformed not by expensive decorations, but by warmth and life. Soft lamps cast a golden glow over the living room. The dining table was set with mismatched plates and a centerpiece of pine branches and candles. Music played from a small speaker, Ella Fitzgerald singing Christmas songs, her voice rich and timeless. "Look who I found," Lily announced, pulling Michael into the kitchen where Rachel stood at the stove, stirring something that filled the apartment with the aroma of herbs and spices. Rachel turned, and the smile that illuminated her face sent a wave of warmth through Michael's chest. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. No makeup, no pretense. Just Rachel, somehow more beautiful in this simple setting than any elegantly dressed woman he'd escorted to charity galas or corporate events. "You made it," she said, putting down her spoon to greet him. She rose on tiptoes to kiss his cheek, a gesture so natural it seemed they had been doing it for years rather than days. "I promised I would," Michael replied, handing her the bag of breakfast ingredients. "Pancake supplies as requested. Though I should warn you, my cooking skills are theoretical rather than practical." Rachel peeked inside the bag and laughed. "Organic maple syrup from Vermont artisanal pancake mix. You do realize we usually use the $2 box from the corner store, right?" Michael shrugged, smiling. "Go big or go home, isn't that what they say?" "I brought the book too," Lily exclaimed, having already discovered the dinosaur book in Michael's coat pocket. "Mom, look. It has a T-Rex that's purple like mine." A knock at the door announced the arrival of the other guests. Mrs. Eleanor Winters entered first, a dignified woman of 72, with silver hair in an elegant bun and kind eyes that assessed Michael with quiet intelligence. Behind her came Luis Rivera, a young medical student who worked with Rachel at the hospital, carrying a dish covered in foil. "You must be the famous Michael," Eleanor said, extending her hand. "Lily talks of little else these days." Michael shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip despite her age. "All good things, I hope." "Mostly," Eleanor replied with a twinkle in her eye, "though she's quite concerned about your lack of dinosaur knowledge." Luis stepped forward next, balancing his dish while offering a handshake. "Nice to meet you, man. Rachel's told us a lot about you." There was a hint of protective assessment in his gaze, the look of someone who cared deeply about Rachel and Lily's well-being. "All good things, I hope," Michael repeated, accepting the younger man's firm handshake. Luis grinned. "Mostly, though she did mention you're not great at building blanket forts." The tension broke as everyone laughed, and Michael found himself relaxing into this circle of people who had created their own family not through blood, but through choice and circumstance. Dinner was unlike any meal Michael had experienced. The food was simple, a hearty stew Rachel had learned from her grandmother, fresh bread from the bakery down the street, a salad Luis had brought. No expensive wine, just apple cider for everyone, including Lily, who had been allowed to stay up late for the occasion. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by laughter and the easy interruptions of a 4-year-old with important dinosaur facts to share. Eleanor, he discovered, had been a concert pianist in her youth before becoming a music teacher. She had taught Rachel to play when Rachel first moved to the building 5 years earlier, discovering the young nurse's natural talent. "You should hear her play Debussy," Eleanor told Michael. "It would bring tears to your eyes." "I'm out of practice," Rachel demurred. "Between work and Lily, there's not much time." "There's always time for the things that feed your soul," Eleanor replied with the quiet authority of someone who had lived long enough to know what mattered. "We just have to choose it." Louise shared stories from the hospital, the humorous, not the heartbreaking, and Michael found himself genuinely interested in the young man's medical studies and his dream of becoming a pediatric surgeon. Here was someone motivated not by profit or prestige, but by a sincere desire to heal. "Harrison Innovations makes the Laparo guide, right?" Luis asked at one point. "We just started using those at Boston Memorial. Amazing technology. Makes minimally invasive surgery so much more precise." Michael nodded, pleased, but somehow uncomfortable with the reminder of his other life. That's one of our newer product lines. It's saving lives, Louise said simply. Whatever else your company does, that's pretty incredible. The comment stayed with Michael throughout the evening. Whatever else your company does. As if the technology itself was separate from the corporate machinery that produced it, the board meetings, the profit margins, the IPO preparations, the strategic partnerships. Michael had always seen them as inseparable, but now he wondered if there was a distinction he had missed. After dinner, they gathered in the living room. Lily insisted on showing Michael her latest art project, a diorama of dinosaurs living in a purple jungle. Louise helped Rachel with the dishes while Eleanor settled at the piano, her fingers moving across the keys with the fluid grace of decades of practice. "Would you play something, Rachel?" Eleanor asked, standing from the bench. "It's been too long since I heard you." Rachel hesitated, glancing at Michael. "Oh, I don't know." "Please, Mom," Lily pleaded. "Play the water song. It's the best one." With gentle encouragement from everyone, Rachel finally sat at the piano. She flexed her fingers, took a breath, and began to play. The notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the apartment, delicate and crystalline, at first then building to flowing arpeggios that seemed to capture the very essence of moonlight on water. Michael watched her transfixed. Her eyes were half closed, her body swaying slightly with the music. This was a side of Rachel he hadn't seen the artist beneath the practical nurse and devoted mother. Her fingers moved across the keys with natural grace, finding emotion in each phrase that spoke of both technical skill and innate musicality. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of perfect silence before Lily broke it with enthusiastic applause. "That's the best ever, Mommy." Rachel smiled, a touch of embarrassment coloring her cheeks at the admiration in Michael's gaze. "Like I said, out of practice." "That was beautiful," Michael said quietly. "Truly beautiful." The evening continued with more music stories, and eventually Lily falling asleep on the sofa, her head resting against Michael's arm. He sat perfectly still, unwilling to disturb her, feeling a strange protectiveness toward this small person who had so effortlessly claimed a place in his life. As the night wound down, Eleanor and Louise said their goodbyes. Eleanor paused at the door, taking Michael's hand between both of hers. "It was lovely to meet you, Michael," she said, her wise eyes studying his face. "Lily and Rachel deserve someone who sees them clearly." "I think perhaps you do." After they left, Rachel carried Lily to her bedroom while Michael helped clear the remaining dishes. When she returned, she found him standing by the window, watching the snow that continued to fall gently outside. "Penny, for your thoughts," she asked, coming to stand beside him. Michael turned to her, struck again by how naturally beautiful she was in the soft lamplight. "I was thinking that this is what people mean when they talk about home. Not the building, but the feeling of belonging somewhere with someone." Rachel's expression softened. "That's a nice thought." "I've never had it before," Michael admitted. "Not really. My apartment is just a place I sleep and keep my things. He gestured around the modest apartment. "This is a home." Rachel leaned into him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. They stood like that for a long moment, watching the snow transform the ordinary street into something magical. "Stay," Rachel said softly. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Michael looked down at her, seeing the invitation in her eyes, not just for tonight, but for something more, something lasting. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low. "What about Lily?" "She's fast asleep," Rachel replied. "And in the morning you promised her pancakes, remember?" Michael smiled, feeling a sense of rightness settle over him. "I did make that promise." Later, in the stillness of Rachel's bedroom, with moonlight filtering through the curtains and the soft sound of her breathing beside him, Michael experienced a peace he'd never known. Her head rested on his chest, her hand over his heart, as if anchoring him to this moment, this place, this life. His phone vibrated on the nightstand, another urgent message from the world he'd temporarily left behind. Michael ignored it, focusing instead on the feeling of Rachel in his arms and the unfamiliar but welcome sensation of belonging. Morning came with golden light and the excited voice of a 4-year-old. Michael awoke to find Lily standing beside the bed, Rex the dinosaur clutched in one arm. "Are you making pancakes now?" she asked, apparently unsurprised to find him there. "I like mine with chocolate chips and bananas. And syrup. Lots of syrup." Rachel stirred beside him, opening one eye. "Lily, honey, it's only—" She squinted at the clock, 6:30. But pancakes, Lily insisted as if this explained everything. Michael laughed, running a hand through his hair. Pancakes it is. Give us 5 minutes to wake up, okay? Lily nodded seriously. 5 minutes, I'll count. She wandered out, already beginning to count loudly. Rachel groaned, burying her face in the pillow. Sorry, she has no concept of sleeping in. It's fine, Michael replied, kissing her shoulder. I'm usually up by 5:30 anyway. Rachel rolled over to face him, her expression soft with sleep and something deeper. Thank you for staying. Thank you for asking me to. The domesticity of the morning struck Michael as both foreign and wonderful. Making pancakes in Rachel's small kitchen with Lily perched on a stool offering questionable advice about flip timing. Rachel in pajamas and a robe making coffee and occasionally pressing a kiss to his shoulder as she passed. The smell of butter and syrup and coffee mingling in the warm air. This, he realized, was what people built their lives around. Not stock prices or board meetings or product launches, but moments like these imperfect pancakes and sticky fingers and shared laughter over nothing in particular. His phone rang again as they sat down to eat. Howard Blackwell's name flashed on the screen. Michael silenced it without comment, but Rachel had noticed. You should take it if it's important, she said. We don't mind. It can wait, Michael replied, focusing on helping Lily cut her pancakes into more manageable pieces. This is more important. Rachel's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe him, but she didn't press the issue. After breakfast, while Rachel helped Lily get dressed, Michael checked his messages. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, and 45 emails all marked urgent in some form or another. The most recent text from Howard was direct, board emergency meeting called for noon today. Attendance mandatory. Future of company leadership at stake. Michael stared at the message, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. He knew what this meant. Victoria had gone to the board behind his back, likely suggesting he was no longer focused on the company's best interests. Now they were considering removing him from his position, from his company, from the thing he had built from nothing. When Rachel returned to the kitchen, she found him staring at his phone, his expression grim. Bad news, she asked gently. Board politics. Michael replied, not wanting to worry her with the full truth. I need to go into the office for a meeting. On Sunday, Rachel raised an eyebrow. The corporate world never truly sleeps, Michael said, attempting lightness. Especially with our IPO approaching. Rachel studied his face. Is everything okay, Michael, really? He hesitated, then decided on honesty. There's some disagreement about the direction of the company. Nothing I can't handle. She nodded, though her expression suggested she sensed there was more to it. Will you come back after Lily wants to show you the park in the snow? Apparently there's a hill that's perfect for dinosaur sledding, whatever that means. Michael smiled despite his concern. I'll do my best. He kissed her goodbye, promised Lily he would return for dinosaur sledding if possible, and headed out into the snow-covered morning. As he drove toward Harrison Innovations headquarters, Michael's mind raced with strategies and counter-arguments. He had founded this company. He had built it from a dorm room project into a billion-dollar enterprise. He wasn't about to let anyone take it from him, not even the board he had personally selected. The boardroom was tense when Michael arrived exactly at noon. Howard sat at the head of the table, his expression grave. Victoria sat to his right, impeccably dressed, even on a Sunday, her face a mask of professional concern. The other board members and executives avoided Michael's gaze as he took his seat. Thank you for joining us, Michael. Howard began, his deep voice somber. I apologize for the weekend meeting, but certain concerns have been raised that require immediate attention. Concerns about what exactly? Michael asked, his voice deliberately level. Victoria spoke up. About the company's public image and strategic direction in the lead-up to our IPO. She slid a folder across the table toward him. The press release you explicitly rejected was leaked to several media outlets this morning. Michael opened the folder to find printouts from business news sites. Each featured the charity initiative for single-parent healthcare worker with quotes attributed to him about how his personal connection had inspired the program. I didn't authorize this, Michael said, anger building inside him. In fact, I explicitly forbade it. That's part of the problem, Howard replied. The release went out anyway, apparently from someone on our PR team who believed it had been approved. Now we have a public commitment to a program that doesn't exist and a CEO who opposes it. Michael looked directly at Victoria. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. Victoria maintained her professional demeanor. The board approved the initiative, Michael. Your objection was noted but overruled as not being in the best interests of the company. The board cannot approve public statements attributed to me without my consent. Michael said, his voice dangerously quiet. Marcus Johnson cleared his throat. Actually, under Section 7 of the corporate bylaws, the board can authorize statements on behalf of the company if deemed necessary for corporate stability. Corporate stability, Michael repeated flatly, and my relationship with Rachel somehow threatens that stability. Your behavior over the past month does, Victoria replied. Missed meetings, unavailability during business hours, public appearances with a woman and child who have no official connection to you or this company. It creates uncertainty, Michael. Investors hate uncertainty. Michael looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes in turn. These were people he had hired, mentored, trusted with his vision. Now they sat in judgment, questioning his commitment because he had found someone outside these walls who mattered to him. Let me be perfectly clear, Michael said, his voice steady. I founded this company to create technology that saves lives. That remains my priority. But I will not allow my personal life to be co-opted as a marketing strategy, nor will I accept the board dictating who I can spend my time with. Howard sighed heavily. No one is dictating your personal choices, Michael. We're simply asking you to consider the timing and the optics. The IPO is 3 months away. After that, you can do whatever you want with whoever you want. And in the meantime, Michael asked, I put my life on hold. Pretend Rachel and Lily don't exist. Victoria leaned forward. We're suggesting a middle path. Embrace the charity initiative. It's already public anyway. Frame your relationship with Miss Morgan as part of your growing awareness of the challenges facing healthcare workers. It's a positive narrative that supports both your personal choices and the company's public image. Michael stood abruptly. This meeting is over. The press release will be retracted immediately. A statement will be issued clarifying that it was released without authorization. And Victoria, he fixed her with a cold stare, clear out your office. You're fired. The room erupted in protests and objections. Howard rose to his feet. Michael, you can't fire the marketing director 3 months before an IPO. It would create exactly the kind of instability we're trying to avoid. Watch me, Michael replied. And if the board attempts to block me, I'll remind everyone that I still own 51% of this company. I can dissolve the entire board if necessary. Howard's face hardened. Then we'll put it to a vote. The bylaws allow for temporary suspension of CEO authority pending a vote of no confidence. Until it's resolved, you can't make unilateral decisions like firing executives. Michael stared at Howard, a man who had been his mentor and advocate for nearly 20 years. You're suspending me from my own company. Howard's expression held genuine regret, just temporarily, until we can resolve these issues. For a moment, Michael considered fighting, calling his lawyers, exercising his shareholder rights, waging a corporate war to maintain control. But something inside him rebelled at the thought of more conflict, more time wasted on boardroom politics instead of what truly mattered. Fine, he said finally, have your vote. But understand this, if you proceed with using Rachel and Lily in any way for corporate publicity without their explicit consent, I will take this company apart brick by brick before I let that happen. He walked out without waiting for a response, the boardroom silent behind him. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the city gleaming under a clear blue sky. Michael sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. In the span of an hour, he had gone from making pancakes with Lily to being effectively suspended from the company he had created. His phone rang, Rachel's name and face appearing on the screen. He took a deep breath before answering. Hey, he said, working to keep his voice normal. Hey yourself, Rachel replied, warmth in her tone. How did your meeting go? Michael hesitated, then decided she deserved the truth. Not well. The board is considering suspending me as CEO. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Because of me, Rachel said finally. It wasn't a question. Because they're short-sighted, Michael corrected. They think my personal life is interfering with the company's interests. They even leaked a press release about a fake charity initiative for single-parent healthcare workers trying to capitalize on our relationship. They did what? The warmth in Rachel's voice had been replaced by indignation. It's Victoria's doing. She's always had her own agenda. She wanted to be more than my marketing director, and when that didn't happen, she channeled her ambition into climbing the corporate ladder. I'm so sorry, Michael. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. Rachel's voice was tinged with guilt. Your company is your life's work. I don't want it to be the reason you lose it. You're not, Michael said firmly. And maybe it's time I redefine what my life's work actually is. I started Harrison Innovations to create medical technology that would save lives. Somewhere along the way, it became about growth metrics and market share and IPO valuations. I lost sight of why I began in the first place. Rachel was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, Michael admitted, but I'm not giving up without a fight. Not on the company, and certainly not on us. Us, Rachel repeated softly. It feels strange to hear that word. Good strange. Get used to it, Michael said. Now I believe I was promised dinosaur sledding. Michael could hear the smile in Rachel's voice when she replied, The hill awaits, and so do we. Patterson Park was alive with children taking advantage of the fresh snow. Michael spotted Rachel immediately bundled in a blue coat, her blonde hair visible beneath a knitted hat. Beside her, Lily wore a puffy purple coat and was dragging a small plastic sled toward what could only generously be called a hill, more of a gentle slope in the park's landscape. Mr. Michael, Lily shouted when she saw him abandoning her sled to run toward him. You came, Rex said you would be too busy with important things, but I told him you promised. Michael knelt to her level, something he found himself doing naturally now. I always keep my promises to you, Lily. She beamed at him, snowflakes clinging to her eyelashes. Good, because Rex needs someone strong to push the sled. Mommy doesn't push hard enough. Rachel approached, her cheeks pink from the cold. I push plenty hard. Someone just has unrealistic expectations about achieving liftoff. Michael laughed, rising to greet her with a quick kiss. Good thing I'm here then. I excel at unrealistic expectations. Rachel studied his face. Everything okay? You seem tense. Better now, Michael replied truthfully. He would tell her more about the board meeting later, but for now he wanted to preserve this moment, the snow, the park, the simple joy of being with them. For the next hour, Michael devoted himself entirely to the serious business of dinosaur sledding. Rex the dinosaur was positioned at the front of the small plastic sled, with Lily behind him shrieking with delight as Michael pushed them down the modest slope. Other parents watched with amusement as the man in the expensive coat ran alongside the sled, making dinosaur roaring sounds that had Lily doubled over with laughter. Rachel took photos with her phone, capturing moments that Michael knew would become precious memories. Lily with her arms raised in triumph at the bottom of the hill. Michael pretending to be terrified of Rex, the three of them making snow angels side by side. As the afternoon waned and other families began to leave, they found themselves alone in a quiet corner of the park. Lily was busily constructing a snow nest for Rex, piling snow into what looked vaguely like a crater. Rachel stood close to Michael, their breath farting clouds in the cold air. Thank you for coming. I know you probably had important CEO things to do. Nothing more important than this, Michael said, meaning it completely. Rachel turned to face him, her expression growing serious. Michael, there's something I need to ask you. Anything, he replied. Are we real? She asked, vulnerability evident in her voice. Because my life is complicated enough without adding something that's not going anywhere. And Lily, she glanced at her daughter, lowering her voice. She's already so attached to you. I can't let her get hurt. Michael took Rachel's gloved hands in his. We're the most real thing in my life right now. I don't know exactly what's happening between us, but I know it matters. You matter. Lily matters. Even with all the complications, the board suspending you, the fake charity nonsense, all of it. Her eyes searched his. I heard Victoria's name in the media this morning, talking about Harrison Innovations' new initiative for single parents. She mentioned me, Michael. Not by name, but it was obvious. Michael felt a surge of anger. She had no right. A single mom with a tiny apartment and a mountain of student debt doesn't exactly fit into your world. Rachel continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe the board is right. Maybe I'm a distraction you can't afford right now. Maybe I'm tired of my world, Michael said quietly. Maybe I've been looking for something real without even knowing it. Before Rachel could respond, a shout from Lily drew their attention. Mom, Mr. Michael, look what I made. They turned to see Lily standing proudly beside her snow creation, which now featured three crude snow figures of varying heights. It's us, she announced. See? That's you, Mr. Michael, 'cause you're the tallest. And that's Mommy, and that's me and Rex. Michael stared at the simple snow sculpture, emotion welling in his chest. In Lily's innocent representation, they were already a unit of family. The realization both terrified and exhilarated him. It's perfect, sweetie, Rachel called, her voice slightly uneven. As they prepared to leave the park, Michael's phone rang again. Howard Blackwell's name flashed on the screen. This time Michael answered. Yes, Howard. The vote is scheduled for tomorrow morning, Howard said without preamble. 9 a.m., I thought you should know. Thank you for the courtesy, Michael replied formally. There was a pause, then Howard spoke again, his voice softer. For what it's worth, Michael, I think you are making a mistake. But I also think you deserve the chance to make your own mistakes. Not everyone on the board agrees. I appreciate that, Howard. I'll see you tomorrow. Michael hung up, finding Rachel watching him with concern. The vote to suspend me is tomorrow morning, he explained. 9 a.m. Rachel's expression fell. I'm so sorry, Michael. This is all because of me. No, Michael said firmly. This is because for the first time in 20 years, I'm putting something ahead of the company. They don't know how to handle it. What will you do? Michael took a deep breath. I'm going to make them a proposal they won't expect. That night, after he had read Lily her bedtime story, Michael sat at Rachel's small dining table with his laptop, working late into the night. Rachel brought him coffee, sitting across from him in comfortable silence, occasionally offering a thought or perspective that surprised him with its insight. You know, she said at one point, hospitals go through this too. Administrators who forget that the point is patient care, not budget metrics. Michael looked up at her. Exactly. Somewhere along the way, the company became the point rather than what the company does. So remind them, Rachel said simply, as if it were obvious. By the time they went to bed, Michael had a plan. Not the one he had initially intended, full of legal maneuvering and corporate threats, but something different. Something that felt right in a way his first instinct hadn't. The following morning, Michael arrived at Harrison Innovations dressed not in his usual impeccable suit, but in a simple shirt and blazer. He carried no briefcase, no stack of legal documents, just a single folded paper in his pocket. The boardroom fell silent as he entered. All members were present, along with key executives. Victoria sat beside Howard, her expression carefully neutral, but with a hint of triumph in her eyes. Michael. Howard began, his tone formal. Before we proceed with the vote, would you like to address the board? Michael nodded, taking his place at the head of the table. I would. He looked around the room, meeting each person's gaze. These were people he had worked with for years, people who had helped build Harrison Innovations into what it was today. Some looked uncomfortable, some defiant, some genuinely sad about the situation. 20 years ago, Michael began, I founded this company with a simple mission to create medical technology that saves lives, not to maximize shareholder value, not to achieve a successful IPO. Those were means to an end, not the end itself. He pulled the folded paper from his pocket and placed it on the table. This is my proposal. Not my resignation, as some of you might have hoped, but a restructuring. Murmurs rippled through the room. Howard picked up the paper, scanning it quickly, his eyebrows rising in surprise. You want to step down as CEO of us, Howard said, but remain as Chief Innovation Officer, focusing exclusively on product development. Michael nodded. The company needs a CEO who lives and breathes corporate strategy. That was me for 20 years. It's not me anymore. But the company still needs what I do best. Innovation and vision creating technology that matters. Victoria leaned forward. And the charity initiative? We'll proceed, Michael replied, but honestly and transparently. No exploitation of my personal relationship with Rachel. No fabricated quotes. A genuine commitment to supporting healthcare workers, particularly those with families. Howard studied the proposal further. And you're recommending me as interim CEO until the board can conduct a proper search. You've been with Harrison Innovations almost since the beginning, Michael said. You understand the mission. I trust you to maintain it. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Michael hadn't given them what they expected, either a bitter fight or a total surrender. He had offered a third path, one that preserved what mattered while acknowledging that change was necessary. Howard looked up from the paper. I move that we table the vote of no confidence and consider this proposal instead. The motion was seconded, and after an hour of discussion, far more collegial than Michael had anticipated, the board unanimously approved the restructuring. Victoria's face betrayed her disappointment. She had clearly expected to emerge with more power, not to find herself answering to a new CEO, while Michael remained firmly involved in the company's core mission. After the meeting, Howard walked Michael to his office, soon to be Howard's office. That was unexpected, the older man said, but I think it's the right decision for everyone. Michael smiled slightly. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most obvious one. Howard stopped at the door, turning to face Michael directly. For what it's worth, I hope it works out with Ms. Morgan. She must be quite something to inspire this kind of change in you. She is, Michael replied. She and Lily both are. As Michael cleared out his personal items, leaving the office ready for Howard to assume the CEO position, he felt a strange lightness. For 20 years, his identity had been inextricably linked to his role as CEO of Harrison Innovations. Now he was choosing to redefine himself, not abandoning his creation, but relating to it differently, making space for something else, something equally important. His phone chimed with a text from Rachel. How did it go? Michael smiled as he typed his reply. I'm no longer CEO. I'll explain when I see you. Dinner tonight. Her response came quickly. Lily is making spaghetti. She insists you need to try her special sauce. Fair warning, it involves dinosaur-shaped pasta and possibly glitter. Michael laughed out loud, drawing curious glances from staff members passing in the hallway. Wouldn't miss it for the world, he replied. 1 year later, the October morning dawned crisp and clear, painting Boston Common in shades of gold and amber. Fallen leaves carpeted the walkways, crunching pleasantly underfoot as Michael, Rachel, and Lily made their way along the tree-lined path. Remember when we came here last year? Rachel asked, her hand tucked comfortably in Michael's. It was snowing. Dinosaur sledding, Michael recalled with a smile. Rex nearly achieved liftoff, as I recall. Lily, now 5 and deeply immersed in her kindergarten experience, skipped ahead of them, occasionally stopping to collect a particularly beautiful leaf. Rex the purple dinosaur was still a constant companion, though now sharing prominence with a growing collection of books about space. The stars are bigger than dinosaurs, Lily had informed Michael solemnly the previous week. Even Rex understands that. Much had changed in the years since the board meeting. Michael had thrived in his role as Chief Innovation Officer, freed from administrative burdens to focus on what he loved most, creating technology that saved lives. The Laparo Guide 2.0 was revolutionizing minimally invasive surgery in hospitals across the country, including Boston Memorial, where Rachel worked, were reporting dramatically improved outcomes. Rachel had received her promotion to Director of Nursing, her natural leadership finally recognized formally. Her hours were more regular now, allowing more time with Lily and with Michael, who had become a fixture in their lives. 4 months ago, they had moved into a new home, not Michael's sterile penthouse or Rachel's tiny apartment, but a brownstone in a family-friendly neighborhood. It had a garden for Lily to explore, a music room with the Steinway piano Michael had surprised Rachel with on her birthday, and most importantly, space for the three of them to build a life together. Harrison Innovations had completed its IPO successfully under Howard's steady leadership. The genuine charity initiative for healthcare workers had garnered positive press and, more importantly, was making a real difference in the lives of medical professionals struggling to balance career and family. Victoria had departed the company shortly after the restructuring, moving to a competitor where last Michael heard she was making waves as an aggressive marketing director. He wished her well genuinely. Everyone deserved to find their place. Look, Ma, Lily called, pointing to a street artist drawing with chalk on the walkway near the park center. Can I do that? Rachel smiled. If the artist doesn't mind, sure. They approached the artist, a young woman creating elaborate mandalas on the pavement. She happily offered Lily some chalk, showing her a clear space where she could create her own design. What are you going to draw? Michael asked, crouching beside Lily as she surveyed her canvas of concrete. You'll see, she replied mysteriously, already selecting colors with intense concentration. Michael and Rachel stood back watching as Lily began her creation. The morning sun warmed them despite the autumn chill, glinting off the simple diamond ring on Rachel's left hand, a recent addition placed there just 2 weeks ago during a quiet moment at home. No regrets, Rachel asked softly, leaning against Michael's shoulder. About stepping down as CEO? Michael shook his head. Not one. The company is doing well. The technology is helping more people than ever. And he paused, searching for the right word. I'm present now, for the work that matters most and for the people who matter most. Rachel squeezed his hand, understanding the weight behind his words. Michael Harrison, once defined entirely by his professional achievements, had discovered that success could mean something entirely different. Something measured not in stock prices or corporate expansions, but in bedtime stories, piano duets, and dinosaur adventures. Mom, Michael, come see, Lily called excitedly, stepping back from her artwork. They moved closer to see what she had created. On the pavement, drawn with a child's imperfect but earnest hand, were three stick figures of varying heights. The tallest wore a blue shirt and glasses, Michael's reading glasses that he'd recently started using. The middle figure had yellow hair and a green dress, Rachel. The smallest figure stood between them, purple dinosaur in hand. Above them all, Lily had written in careful, newly learned letters, "My family." Michael stared at the drawing, emotion welling in his chest just as it had a year ago when Lily had created those same figures in snow. But now the realization that had both terrified and exhilarated him then filled him only with certainty and joy. He knelt beside the chalk drawing, looking up at Rachel with all the love that had grown between them over the past year. Rachel Morgan, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it, can I stay for every late moment of your life? Rachel's eyes shimmered with tears as she recognized his words for what they were, not just a proposal but a promise. A promise to stay, to be present, to choose them every day just as he had been choosing them for the past year. You already stayed through the worst, she said softly, echoing his own certainty. Of course you can stay for the rest. She bent down and cupped his face in her hands, kissing him, with a tenderness that spoke of both passion and comfort, the kind of kiss that felt like coming home. Does that mean you live with us now? Lily asked, looking between them with practical interest and apparently unfazed by the emotional moment unfolding before her. Michael and Rachel both laughed, the sound mingling with the rustle of leaves and distant city noises. I already live with you, sweetheart, Michael reminded her gently. But yes, it means we'll always be a family. Lily considered this for a moment, then nodded with satisfaction. Good. Can we have pancakes every Saturday like the special ones with chocolate chips? Michael grinned. Deal, but only if you help flip them. I'm very good at flipping, Lily declared with utmost confidence. Rachel stood and offered Michael her hand. He took it, rising to stand beside her, brushing chalk dust from his knees. Together they continued their walk through the park, Michael on one side, Rachel on the other, Lily between them, their hands linked in an unbroken chain. Three shadows stretched across the leaf-strewn path. Three hearts, different but whole, bound together not by blood or obligation, but by choice, the daily choice to stay, to see each other clearly, to build something that none of them could have created alone. They didn't talk about what came next, about wedding plans, or future siblings for Lily, or the next phase of their professional lives. They didn't need to, because sometimes the clearest love doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand declarations. Sometimes it simply shows up in chalk drawings and pancake promises and the quiet certainty of three people walking hand in hand through an autumn morning, their future stretching before them like the sun-dappled path beneath their feet. And for Michael Harrison, who had spent most of his life believing that success meant control, achievement, and independence, this was the most surprising discovery of all, that true success might actually be found in the willing surrender of his carefully constructed solitude for the beautiful, messy, unpredictable joy of a shared life. The kind of life that simply shows up unexpectedly and stays.